Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining and welcome back to another live session on Declassified Caribbean. Now, we're going to be looking at this topic, 60K, that's 60,000 Moroccans reach Spain, Vatican influence, and UN Agenda 230 under scrutiny. So we're here to debate that. We're seeing that since the pandemic of 2020, that we have been witnessing that the New World Order guys are pushing their agenda with intense alacrity, and we have to watch them. We have to examine what is happening in the world, because much of the world is still shrouded in mystery and in secrecy, though we are seeing much at play now where they are publicly making their agenda known to us. So we have to follow exactly what they're doing so that we can be able to see where we're going as a world, because there are dark forces which are pushing us into what is known as a one world government, one world religion. So good evening, and everyone, and welcome to this live session. We're examining a story that is raising difficult questions about migration, sovereignty, and the institutions shaping global policy. Reports indicate that tens of thousands of Moroccans have reached Spain in recent days, in a day, placing renewed pressure on Spain's immigration system and reigniting debates about Europe, about border security, integration, and national identity. But beyond the headlines, some observers are asking whether these migration trends are simply the result of conflict, economic hardship, and geography, or whether they also reflect broader international policies promoted by global institutions. We'll explore claims surrounding the Vatican's advocacy for migrants, the United Nations Agenda 2030, and sustainable development goals, and whether these initiatives are influencing migration policy in ways that deserve greater public scrutiny. We'll also examine that these organizations officially say what they say about immigration, migration, and contrast that with concerns raised by critics who argue that national governments are ceding too much control over their borders. As always on this channel, our objective is to separate documented facts from interpretation, ask difficult questions, and encourage respectful debate. Is Europe facing an unavoidable humanitarian challenge? Are international organizations exercising appropriate influence or too much? And what could these developments mean for Spain, Europe, and the wider international community? Let me know where you are watching from and tell us your perspective. Should immigration policy remain solely in the hands of sovereign nations, or should international institutions play a larger role? Let's get into the conversation. Now, I opened up with an article that is coming from Al Jazeera, and that was, for those of you who might not have remembered, that the Pope of Rome, Pope Leo XIV, visited Spain last month, right? It was in June that he visited, month before last, because now we're now in August. Now he's saying here, dignity has no passport. Pope makes appeal for migrants in Canary Islands, and that's in Spain. Pope Leo will meet with about 1,000 migrants on Friday who have braved dangerous Atlantic waters to reach Europe. Now, this is what the Pope is saying, and he was there June 11th, 2026. Pope Leo XIV has appealed toward leaders to treat refugees and migrants more humanely, warning a visit to Spain's Canary Islands, one of Europe's migration hotspots, that history would condemn those who allowed people fleeing a war or poverty to suffer. In what he called an appeal to the conscience of politicians in Europe and the international community on Thursday, the first American Pope said that the human dignity has no passport and does not lose its value when crossing a border. So he says that human dignity has absolutely no passport. We cannot, he's suggesting, grow accustomed to counting the dead, said the Pope at Gran Canaria's port of Arguineguín, dubbed the Dock of Shame by relief organizations after some 1,000 people were stranded in squalid conditions there in the early months of the COVID-19 pandemic. May history, he's saying here, not accuse us of turning the pain of those who suffer into a common sight along our shores, he said to thousands gathered near a memorial to migrants lost at sea. So the Pope is telling their people in Spain that they should not deport people because according to the Pope, dignity has no passport. So we're trying to build our arguments here because we're wondering who really is behind the system. There is another beautifully written article, The Role of the Vatican in the Modern World. And it was actually written by Eugene V. Rostow. And Mr. Eugene V. Rostow, on the Secretary of State for Political Affairs, addressed a conference on the Vatican and peace at Boston College. And this was some years ago. Now listen to what he's saying. My subject today is fascinating because the activities of the church touch almost every country and nearly every aspect of human life. The Vatican is not only the focal point of a vast spiritual and cultural community and the visible symbol of a living system of ideas and values, it is a coordinating secretariat for a far-flung multinational bureaucracy. Any discussion, he's saying, of the church's international role needs to consider both its spiritual and temporal dimensions. Now, when he means here temporal, means political or government dimensions. In both, the Vatican plays an important role in international and political life. The Pope, in his primary role, is the spiritual head of the Roman Catholic Church, with its over billions of people, communicants, who regard him as the earthly vicar of Christ. And for those of you who don't understand what the vicar of Christ means, it means that he is literally God on earth. For centuries, the Church, the Roman Catholic, has exerted a profound and incalculable spiritual and cultural influence in many parts of the world, helping to shape men's minds and motives which govern their actions. Our own Western culture is inextricably entwined with Catholicism. That is what they are here suggesting. But here's that really fascinates me when he mentions here that the foreign policy of the United States and the foreign policy of the Vatican are one. The foreign policy, let me read to you, in the recognition of the need for a stable world order and for development as a necessary means of assuring this stability, the policy of the Vatican and the foreign policy of the United States since the days of Point 4 and the Marshall Plan are one. I repeat that. In the recognition of the need for a stable world order and for development as the necessary means of assuring this stability, the policy of the Vatican and the foreign policy of the United States of America since the days of Point 4 and the Marshall Plan, which is after World War II, are one. So we have to look at these things in light of what we see is happening there in Spain, and bear in mind that Spain is what? A predominantly Catholic country. Let's look at this video here by this gentleman who is presenting to us and asking, how did this happen? How did this happen? It can't be that some guys just got up, some immigrants just got up one day and said, oh, we're going to go to Spain, right? This has to be a coordinated effort and something that is true. Oh, let me see if this is what I was looking for. Right, who funded the invasion? Let me get it on the screen for you, because these are questions we have to be asking, we have to raise, because we look at systems of power. We're not here to look at, reacting to what is happening, but we have to delve into systems of power. So let's look at what he's saying here. Okay, so let me get there. Oh, this is not where I was. This is what I'm looking for. Okay.
Check out these videos of Moroccan invaders being dropped off at the Spanish border. So the big question we should all be asking is, who is funding such a large operation and why? I mean, obviously 50,000 military-aged men didn't all wake up on the same day and decide, hey, I think I'll go invade Spain. This was a coordinated assault that would have taken lots of planning and money to pull off. I mean, think about how long it would take just to recruit 50,000 men who would go along with this. They clearly aren't refugees. There is no war in Morocco. There's no famine. So who's behind it? Well, there's a lot of speculation out here, but the answer really is likely Morocco itself staged this invasion as payback for Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez reaching out to Algeria to strengthen energy ties there. Morocco and Algeria have been in a Cold War for decades, and this was probably Morocco's way of reminding Spain of the leverage it has over migration. Check out these videos of Moroccan invaders being dropped off at the Spanish border. So the big question we should all be asking is, who is funding such a large operation and why? I mean, obviously 50,000 military-aged men didn't all wake up on the same day and decide, hey, I think I'll go invade Spain. This was a coordinated assault that would have taken lots of planning and money.
So that is very true, right? Nobody would get up in the morning and say, okay, we're going to invade this country. And the numbers of people, the large numbers of people that we saw, literally saw, means that it was a manufactured, coordinated event. It was not something that just happened at the spur of the moment, something which somebody behind the scenes actually planned. And as we're looking, we're connecting the dots because we are seeing that the Pope was in fact in Spain month before last, that was June, and that he would have had meetings with the officials there. We're understanding that the current prime minister, the president of prime minister of Spain, is a left-wing prime minister. So he's quite progressive, as we've seen the Democrats in the United States. So he has a free, open border policy. Now, the fact of the matter is you have to understand that the Pope works on both ends of the political aisle. He can be on the right, he also can be on the left. So we can't look at things as if this is just in a vacuum or it's black and white. The Vatican does not work like that. Now, here we're looking, there's another article here, and this is referring to the immigration policy in the United States. And it's saying here that Peter Thiel, for those of you, I'm sure you've heard of him, Peter Thiel is unleashing a neocolonial billionaire fantasy in Honduras. And for those of you who don't know, Honduras is in Central America, and that was a country in which Hillary Clinton went to under Barack Obama's presidency when the president of Honduras wanted to have improved on the working conditions of the people in Honduras by increasing their minimum wage, and that the Obama administration was not in agreement, and Hillary Clinton went there. She was then the Secretary of State, and they actually deposed him. And that was what led to the migration, the huge migration of Hondurans and Central Americans going to the United States, right? And we saw that before Biden actually left office and before. So in April 2025, Peter Thiel's Palantir made headlines after documents were released detailing his partnership with Immigration and Customs Enforcement, that's the ICE, to create Immigration's OS, a massive database of information gathered from a variety of sources, including the IRS, in order to surveil, detain, and deport immigrants. So this is also about building what? A surveillance state, a super surveillance state. This is not just about people coming to the country, leaving and going. This is about requiring the need to build a surveillance state. Thiel is not new to spearheading endeavors that aim to dehumanize and attack people of color. In fact, the tech mogul is one of the billionaires leading our modern day version of tech neocolonialism. And when they say tech neocolonialism, that's what they mean. They mean enslaving the entire global population. The new yet old imperial monster that colonizes land, extracts resources, exploits natives, and is happy to profit off of their suffering. As a Honduran immigrant myself, I would know. In 2009, Honduras found itself in turmoil after a military coup destabilized the country, leading to unprecedented levels of violence and repression. Taking a page out of the shock doctrine playbook, the elite political actors behind the coup, including narco-dictator Juan Orlando Hernandez, now pardoned by Donald Trump after being sentenced to 45 years in prison for drug trafficking and weapons charges, watered down environmental protections on Honduran land and approved illegal contracts to sell indigenous and protected land to the highest bidder. And this was actually approved by the United States of America under the Barack Hussein Obama's presidency. Now, we have, among other corrupt dealings and land grabs, the government approved a law that enabled the creation of Peter Thiel's zones for employment and economic development. Now, they're telling us that without immigrants, illegal immigrants, that is, we cannot grow, or we need immigrants for our economies to grow. We're hearing that coming from Barbados, from Jamaica, from the United States, and perhaps in Spain also, we're hearing that they need immigrants to grow the economy because the Spanish people are not having children the rate of which they would like them to have them. So the population is actually not increasing. So they need illegal immigrants to beef up the population in terms of human labor. Now, Zeds derive from the idea of charter cities. So what they're doing is trying to build these charter smart cities. Proposed by former World Bank executive and economist Paul Romer, these proposed cities are enclaves within lower income nations that promote economic growth through privatization and the disposal of national regulations, while gifting major tax incentives for foreign nations to invest in business. Special economic zones in Kenya, Bangladesh, and Ethiopia have faced criticism due to low wages, harsh working conditions, and threats to rights to free association and collective bargaining. Roma, one of the initial proponents of ZED, which is ZEDE, in Honduras, expressed criticism in 2015 regarding the Honduran Zeds and their lack of accountability to local laws and anti-democratic governance. So what it suggests here is that that is the sort of infrastructure that they're building for these illegal immigrants to come to the countries and then to erase, as it were, our democratic infrastructure, where they will be working and they will have no rights at all. Okay, and that is what we have to look at. Now, these Zeds are a project of Praxis, a tech billionaire-funded startup that aims to create libertarian city-states to restore Western civilization. The Zeds are allowed to have their own government, police force, courts, laws, and any taxes collected would not be paid to the Honduran government, but to the Zed themselves. Zeds are a tech billionaire's dream, unbridled power, tech fantasy, and resource boarding, where the government is run by AI and cryptocurrency is the main currency. So this is where we are moving to right now. We're seeing where our governments are accepting these illegal immigrants, having laws unto themselves and paying billionaires, and our labor will be enslaved. So this has nothing to do, but you're going to be reacting to the news based on what people are saying. And that is what we find about our podcast now. Everybody is reacting and they're not looking at the root cause. Why are these things happening? And they're happening globally. And that is what we are here to do. But let's look at some clippings of what is really happening so we can get the facts, and then we can move with a further and more detailed analysis, because that is what it's all about, using our brain to think. So let me get some of the clippings here, and we will watch some of really what is happening in our world today. Now, Trump is actually responding, right, interestingly, to what is happening, and it's interesting to see what he's saying about this invasion as they're describing it.
Yesterday, and I watched the catastrophe that took place. It looks like an invasion of a country by hundreds of thousands of people. And that same thing's going to happen to us if the Republicans don't get elected, except worse. Much bigger, much easier to get into, despite the fact that we have built thousands of miles of wall which I said we were going to do, but we didn't have that, forget it. But we have the safest border in the world. If we're not in office, our country will be invaded at levels that made Spain look small time. And when I watched it, I said, boy, I said, I'm going to say it because I knew you were going to be at Camp David. And I say, that's going to be a talking point for the midterms. Because when you look at what happened to Spain, they don't know what to do. And it's happening again today. They're coming in by the tens of thousands. They're just invading the country. And what that is weak law, bad management, but very liberal law.
So Trump is using this as a political game, right? Because that is what they do. They speak from both sides of their mouths. He's going to use this as a political game that he's trying actually to. That's why ICE is important, because it's a yin yang in politics, right? Where they are going to tell you that this one, I told you so, even though they are on the same agenda. So you have to be very careful in terms of listening to either the right or the left, because they're working on the same agenda. They're part of the same political system that is corrupt to the core. That is what you have to do. That is what you need to know. Now, in building also on the thesis of what is happening and who is controlling the world and who really is responsible, we're hearing a lot about Israel and the Jews and Zionism, but lots of people are very quiet about the role of the Vatican in everything that is happening around the world. Remember that it was not Malachi Martin, but it was actually the writer of the Vatican in World Politics, that Avram Manhattan, that told us that there's nothing that happens in the world in which the Vatican is not responsible. Now, we're seeing here in The Rulers of Darkness, a book that was written by Saucy, that's F. Tupper Saucy, and he's saying that here, the only people in the world, it seems, who believe in the conspiracy theory of history, all right, are those of us who have studied it. So there are people who don't believe, oh, this is happening. Well, they would rather say it's the Jews, the Jews, the Jews, the Jews, until we understand that it's not the Jews. While Franklin D. Roosevelt might have exaggerated when he said nothing happens in politics by accident. If it happens, it was planned that way. Carroll Quigley, Bill Clinton's favorite professor at Georgetown University, boldly admitted in his Tragedy and Hope, a very good book that is for you to read. It's very dense and very big book, thick book, but it is worth reading. That the multitudes were already under the control of a small but powerful group bent on world domination, and B, Quigley himself was part of that group. So Carroll Quigley, that was Bill Clinton's former professor at Georgetown University, wrote about the big conspiracy in world politics, but he was a part of that agenda, much as we see with RFK Jr. and we see also with the likes of Jeffrey Sachs and these great men. They're part of the agenda, but they're also revealing some of the things to us. Internet conspiracy sites strive to identify the conspiratorial factions. We get pieces here and pieces there. The world is run by Freemasons, some say. Others say Skull and Bones and a loose confederation of secret societies. CIA gets lots of votes along with Mossad, though I suspect these factions are merely tools, and of course, the British. A major frontrunner is the international banking cartel. When Victor Marsden published the Protocols of the Elders of Zion in 1906, which purported to be a Jewish plan to take over the world, Jewish writers denied responsibility, charging a Catholic plot to defame Jewry. Whose side was Marsden on? You can get so deep into conspiracies that the suspects start canceling each other out. It can become frustrating. And he's now saying here, I'm happy to report that F. Tupper Saucy has come to our emotional rescue. During his 10 years as a fugitive from the Department of Justice, convicted of a crime that cannot be found in the law books, Saucy occupied himself with an investigation into the powers that be. It was an investigation, the likes of which, as far as I know, has never been undertaken before. The fruit of his amazing legwork is Rulers of Evil, a powerful book that in less loving hands might have been angry and judgmentals. Now, he's saying here that Sauce's thesis, listen to what he's saying, there is indeed a small group that runs the world, but we can't call it a conspiracy because it identifies itself with signs, mottos, and monuments. Signs, mottos, and monuments, you ask. Quick, what occupies the highest point on the US Capitol building? It's probably the most oft published statue on earth, and you can't name it. As long as you don't know whose feet are firmly planted atop your country's legislative center, or how she got there, or whence she came, the group that controls America remains invisible. Once you know these things, the fog begins lifting. Saucy has analyzed hundreds of signatory clues left by the true rulers of the earth or the world, clues that we have perhaps been trained to ignore. He's traced them to their origins and matched them to facts of history going back 6,000 years ago, all balanced against the most reliable human reference work there is, the Bible. The result, an unavoidable touchstone for all future works on the subject. Now, he's saying here whether or not it's appropriate for a literary agent to write his clients forward, I don't know. If I'm breaking the rules here, well, this is a rule-breaking book. Example, during last spring's, and he's saying, Book Expo in Los Angeles, I agently introduced my client, Topper Saucy, to one of New York's most unshockable publishing executives. As Topper articulately summarized Rulers of Evil for him, I personally witnessed the brow of this fearless executive develop a twitch. I saw him actually gulp. With my own ears, I heard him say, "This is a little too extreme for us." The twitch developed as Topper was saying, the Roman Catholic Church really does run the world, including the United States government, and this is openly declared in monuments and emblems and insignia, as well as official documents. By the time Topper calmly reached his payoff, and this is good because it's divinely ordained, the executive was staring into space. So we're seeing where people are not really being sensitized as to who controls this world. People are of the view that it is a Zionist. Some are of the view that it is the Freemasonry, the Illuminati, but nobody or very few people are willing to speak about the Roman Catholic influence in world politics. And this is what we're here to discuss this afternoon, because we're seeing a lot of what is happening and the fulfilling of the UN 230 agenda, right? Agenda 2030, of which immigration is a part, right? And here we see that official of the UN agenda, that's Agenda 2030, and the migration, that is the agenda, the SDG 10.7 relates to immigration, facilitate orderly, safe, regular, and responsible migration and mobility of people, including through the implementation of planned and well-managed migration policies. Now, they're saying orderly migration, but do they really want orderly migration? I don't think so. And they're saying here encourages migration through established legal and administrative process rather than irregular crossings. Safe migration aims to reduce exploitation, human trafficking, and death associated with migration. Regular migration refers to migration through lawful channels such as work, visas, family reunification, or refugee and asylum procedures. And they're saying all of these great things. The United Nations Agenda 2030 doesn't contain a goal called immigration. Let us be clear on that. But it includes Target 10.7, which calls on countries to facilitate orderly, safe, regular, and responsible migration and mobility of people through planned and well-managed migration policies. The debate is not over whether this target exists. It clearly does, The real question is, how should it be interpreted and implemented? Does it simply encourage better management of migration that is already occurring, or does it encourage governments to expand legal migration pathways? And where should the balance be struck between international cooperation and international sovereignty? And that is what people are asking. People are not against immigration. People have always seen migrants from all over the world in most countries, right? The problem is that when you see the lack of any sort of order in how it's being done, people are going to get concerned. And if you see what is coming out of Spain, let me see if I can get my thing on the thing fixed. I might have to come out, guys. Let me come out. Could not get back to the full screen. Yeah, so if we understand that we do not like to see that migrants are not taken care of, right? We want to see that migrants are properly taken care of. Where we part company with our government is when they are causing or creating irregular, disorderly migration into countries. Because as we're suggesting here, the UN 2030 agenda does have a goal, and their goal is to flood countries, have open borders in which they will flood countries with illegal immigrants so that they can have cheap labor, they can develop the smart cities, and that they can actually eventually take away our rights. If you're watching what is happening in Spain, there are people literally crying in Ceuta. And they're saying that their government doesn't care, and some of them are hiding in their homes because they're afraid of what some of the hoodlums might be doing to them. Now, we're not calling all Moroccans hoodlums because they're not. What we're seeing and what we witnessed, for the past day or two is that we're seeing people who seem not to be very orderly, right? Shirtless guys just running amok, right? Disorderly. And you don't know where they're coming from. Some of them might be coming from prison cells. And this is what we have to be very careful of, because government is not necessarily transparent. So we have to make sure that we protect ourselves from some of these unruly people. But this is something that we have to watch, because in the Caribbean, we are also, and the world at large, including the United States and countries that share borders with countries like the Dominican Republic with Haiti, the United States with Mexico, and lots of other countries with borders. You've got to watch this very carefully, because very soon, the same thing that you're seeing happening in Spain is going to happen right there at your borders. And what will you do? What will you do? Because as the Spanish people are saying, they feel helpless. They feel like their government has abandoned them. Will your government abandon you? Is this one of the policies of Rome to gain back its supremacy over the entire global population? Because Rome wants global dominance. That's what it is seeking. But what it does, it creates the problem, and then it suggests the solution. And we know the Pope of Rome was in Spain a month or so ago. But let's look at some more articles and some more facts so that we can get ourselves acquainted with what really is taking place in the world. I'm just getting this on the screen. I'm not sure why it went off, but I'm getting it back on the screen. So I beg for you. Now, the Pope here, Pope Leo defends, the Politico is saying, Pope Leo defends integration of migrants, debunking or rebuking, rather. He's rebuking right-wing parties. Now, in his address to the Spanish Parliament, the pontiff called for lawmakers to go beyond the mere management of flows. So he's saying Pope Leo XIV on Monday called for the greater defense and integration of migrants while delivering an address to the Spanish Parliament. So he was there, and that's what he was. And this address was made on June 8th, 2026. The speech delivered on the third day of Leo's week-long trip to Spain puts him at odds with the country's far-right Vox party, which has steadily risen in the polls while campaigning in an anti-immigrant platform, and the center-right People's Party. Now, this is what the Pope is saying. The situation of migrants and refugees calls for a response that focuses on people, addresses the root causes that force them to leave, and goes beyond the mere management of migration flows, the pontiff told lawmakers in Madrid, adding that it was essential for countries to offer safe and legal pathways, a respectful welcome, and real possibilities for integration. Now, nothing is wrong with his words if when you understand who it's coming from. And the fact that the Pope of Rome has billions in wealth, if not trillions in wealth, right there at the Vatican, that could be helping a lot of these people, and that the Vatican also controls the wars around the world, right? No, make no bones about it. If you read the history of the Vatican, you understand that most of the wars being waged around the world, the Vatican has a hand in them all. Because what it wants to do is to create wars and then unalive people, of course, and then it will say, we want peace. And who is a symbol of peace in the world? The Vatican is, the Pope of Rome is. He is described, as it were, as the peace bishop of the world. Now, another article comes here is that Pope, and I'm just giving you the facts, okay? And this is coming from the UK news, right? The Yahoo News, and it says Pope Leo visits Spain to highlight migration, meet victims of sexual abuse, right? And all of these things. So he's running around and he's telling people what they need to do in their own countries. So Pope Leo XIV urged Spaniards on Sunday to stop fanning the flames of polarization as he arrived in Spain at a moment of political turmoil for the socialist-led government and a credibility crisis for the Catholic Church by a pope in 15 years. And the Spaniards turned out in droves to welcome Leo, with an estimated 500,000 people, many of them young, cheering, "This is the youth of the Pope," at a raucous evening prayer vigil in Plaza de Lima in Madrid, where Leo was treated to a rock star's welcome. So Leo's visit signals a return of papal attention to Europe, to Europe's Christian roots, after Pope Francis largely stayed away from the traditional centers of Christianity in favor of smaller Catholic communities farther away. Now, those of you who don't understand, Europe has become very secularized, like the United States is becoming. So what is happening is that the Pope is now moving there to ensure that people go back to their religious foundation, which is Roman Catholicism. And that's exactly what he is also doing. That is one of his agendas, as it were. Now, Vatican News, this is coming from the Vatican News, from the Pope himself, right? IOM, that Director General, that Church brings moral authority to uphold migrants' rights. So they're saying here that the Pope is going to be the negotiator in terms of helping migrants to gain their rights and for countries to respect their rights. Pope Leo XIV met on Thursday with the Director General of the International Organization for Migration, Amy Pope, for a private audience in the Vatican's Apostolic Palace. Afterwards, the MS Pope spoke to Vatican News about her meeting. She's the director of the International Organization for Migration, with the Holy Father and her agency's mission to support the rights of people on the move. So she is the director of the International Organization for Migration, and she was having a meeting with the Pope, because the Pope of Rome is going to teach her how to respect the rights and the dignity of migrants going into different countries. So for those of you who think that the Roman Catholic papacy is only interested in religion and not in politics, you see that they are right throughout the world, going to countries after countries and telling them what they need to do. Now, there's another thing, the commitment of the Vatican's migrants and refugees section to labor migrants. And there's labor migration composes the largest share of contemporary human mobility. Most of the 272 million international migrants today can be classified as labor migrants. So they're telling us that they need migrants so that they can what? Work. But these works are going to be low-paying jobs. That is going to be slave labor. To assess and respond to the challenges posed by labor migration as well as other forms of human mobility, in 2017, Pope Francis established a special office within the Roman Curia called the Migrants and Refugees. That's M&R section. So in the Vatican, they have a section that they created in 2017 called Migrants and Refugees section. In this contribution, I introduced the mission and vision, objectives, and areas of intervention of the M&R section. I also explain how the M&R section on behalf of the Holy See is promoting a Catholic-wide response to the needs and challenges faced by migrants at large, with a particular focus on labor migrants. So the Vatican is setting the stage and the rules of the game for migrant laborers, for labor migrants. Finally, based on the long-standing experience of the Catholic Church, I present some feasible recommendations aiming to improve the global governance of international labor migration. All right, so we're seeing there one after the next that the Pope of Rome, the Vatican, is laying the foundation for world domination. And that is going to be coming about through migration, because through migration, it's going to become anarchy. It's going to get a point where it becomes disorderly. And then he is the one who is going to call for peace. Now, this is another Catholic Church, England and Wales. This is another coming out of England. Vatican adopts the Global Compact on Migration. More than 160 countries, including the Holy See, agreed on Monday, December 2018, to a non-binding UN migration accord that seeks to ensure the safe, orderly, and humane movement of people around the world. Not around Spain, but around the world. The agreement was struck at a two-day intergovernmental conference in Marrakesh, Morocco. So this was in Morocco, to adopt the Global Compact for safe, orderly, and regular migration. Okay, and they call that the GCM. The compact is the world's first international agreement on migration in general, and comes after last month's Global Compact on refugee that was approved by the Third Committee of the United Nations General Assembly in New York City. So article after article, we're seeing where the Vatican is extremely involved in the migration efforts we're seeing happening globally. And they're forming their global compact based on what they want, not necessarily on what the citizens of respective countries desire. Now, here's this. Morocco, Vatican marked 50 years of diplomatic relations built on interfaith dialogue. It's based on interfaith dialogue, because we know that Morocco is largely a Muslim country, but the Vatican has decided that in order to work with even some of its so-called enemies, they have to forget the differences and have to embrace the similarities, and that is world governance. Now, Morocco and Vatican are marking 50 years of diplomatic relations, a partnership centered on promoting interfaith dialogue and cultural understanding between the Islamic and Christian worlds. Over the past 5 decades, both sides have pursued joint initiatives, academic exchanges, and high-level meetings aimed at fostering coexistence and religious tolerance. So we see one after the other, the Vatican is involved, okay? And this is what we have to understand. The Vatican's aim is to control the world and not necessarily just one hemisphere Europe, is to control the entire globe. So whether you're Muslim, you're Islam, you're whatever, you're Hindu, I beg your pardon, you're Christian, the Vatican wants to control them all. The Vatican, Power and Me, reconciling faith and politics as a former Catholic and liberal woman. And this is coming from Medium, and a paper in the United States. So it's nothing, this is a secular newspaper that is online and comes out of the United States. For most of my life, I saw faith and politics as two separate forces, one sacred, the other secular, one belonging to God, the other to government. But as I've grown older and more critically aware of both, I've realized that faith and politics are often two sides of the same coin, systems of power, influence, and control. As a child raised in the Roman Catholic Church, I learned that the Pope was the spiritual leader of more than 1 billion people. His words were to be revered, his presence holy. I accepted this without question, just as I accepted the rituals and rules of my Catholic upbringing. I went to Catholic school from preschool through 8th grade, where my questions about faith were rarely welcomed. Doubt was dangerous and obedience was expected. Later, as I studied American politics, I began to understand power in a different way. I learned how leaders shape narratives, how institutions maintain control, and how systems, religious or political, can be both protective and oppressive. My liberal politics emerged from this understanding, a deep belief in inclusion, equality, and justice paired with skepticism and toward justice. The Vatican is unlike any other place in the world. It is a religious institution, yes, but also a political one, a sovereign city-state with diplomatic relationships, economic assets, and centuries of history influencing kings, presidents, and global movements. And she says here, and I'll admit, I've always had a bit of micro-obsession with it. The rituals, the secrecy, the opulence, there's something undeniably fascinating about the Vatican. I think a lot of people, even non-Catholics, feel the same pull. The idea that a place so small can hold so much influence, that behind these walls lie stories of power, scandal, and faith, is endlessly intriguing. It is horrific, I should say. It's not intriguing by any sort of the imagination. It's a symbol, not just Catholicism, but of the strange intersections of the sacred and the political world. Because the Vatican believes is a religio-political entity. It is not just religious, it is more political than it is religious. Its primary objective is to control the entire political infrastructure of the world, not just Europe and the West, but the entire world, okay, including Africa as we know it. Now, this is coming from the Council on Foreign Relations, which is a magazine from the United States, and it is what people call the CFR as the Illuminati of the United States. People who find themselves as CFR members are members of the Illuminati. And they're saying here under the religion section of the magazine, the CFR, the Council on Foreign Relations, the power of the Pope. Now, this is coming out of the United States. For the past 2,000 years, the Pope has been a major player in global affairs. He's frequently called upon to act as a peace broker, a mediator, an advocate, and an influencer. And with over 1.3 billion followers around the world, the Pope and his government arm, the Holy See, have the power to shape the future. How has the Pope's power changed over time, and what is his role today? Now listen to what the CFR is saying, and this is coming out of the United States of America. And you think they're the ones in control. Presidents and prime ministers are often the first to come to mind when thinking about who shapes foreign policy. But there is another resonating voice at the center of international relations, the Pope. And this is coming out of the United States of America. Unlike other religious leaders, The head of the Roman Catholic Church exercises a unique influence over global affairs, and in recent years, popes have helped shape the outcomes of critical inflection points in history. In this episode, Why It Matters examines the Pope's enduring what? The Pope's enduring influence. It will never stop because the influence of the Roman Catholic Church is enormous. Now, listen to what this transcript from this same paper is saying. You know you've made it to the highest level of prestige when you get to meet the Pope. So if you get an audience with the Pope, you know that you are part of a dark circle. Actors, artists, athletes, and politicians, including, by the way, Miss Mia Motley, who met with Pope Francis sometimes before he died. They all clamor for a handshake with His Holiness. But aside from his star power, the Pope also has a lot of actual power. He runs a massive organization that serves over 1.3 billion Catholics worldwide, nearly a fifth of the global population. On any given issue, you may find the church's position agreeable or egregious. What you may not realize, though, is that for some 2,000 years, how many years? 2,000 years, the Pope has been at the center of global affairs. Global, not just, regional affairs, global. He has a seat at the table alongside heads of state and is sought after for his distinct form of influence and diplomacy. And that is what these very influential people out of the United States are here suggesting. Very important that we begin to understand exactly what is happening in global politics. Somebody saying this is what you forget for not supporting the world's lead oppressor in attacking Iran. Well, the fact of the matter is that it's not only one person attacking Iran. There are many people attacking. As I'm saying, the system is attacking. And what we have is a yin-yang situation in which these global systems of power, the bankers, rather, right? The bankers are on both sides. Do you know that? Let us read that, the history of banking in the Western Hemisphere. So all the wars, they fund both sides. So the United States side and also Iran's side. And then what happens eventually? They divide the world and people begin to argue and they complain and they can't understand what's happening. They're confused. And out of that confusion, what we call ordo ab chao, order out of chaos, then our real enemies will unite and then they will enslave us. See, we must understand that the war on Iran is not just American war. It's the bankers' war. And the bankers are on both sides, on the US side and on the Iranian side. We must understand that because this is the essential point, that the essential glue. And after the pandemic, we should have really understood that because we saw where the entire world came together. No one was talking against the other country, what they were doing. You never heard about imperialism and that you should not take the vaccine because the imperialists want to, get money. You didn't hear anything like that, right? What you were hearing, all the world came together around a virus. The Vatican is on board with climate change. Iran is on board with climate change. China is on board with climate change and all of the attendant policies that go along with climate change. So we must understand that this is not just one country versus the other. This is a global agenda. So very soon the migrants will be coming to our countries too, because what they really want is for us to lower the wages so that these migrants can be able to accept these jobs, and then our countries will become like slave-running plantations. So when they're telling us about economic growth due to tied to immigrants and immigration, people coming to our countries, that is a lie. That is a lie. And we must, everything they say, and I have never been wrong, everything they say, always think in the opposite. Always say, if they say it's black, you must say it's white. If they say that this medicine is effective, you say that it's ineffective. And if you do that, you find that you'll never, even when you don't have the evidence, you'll never be wrong. Why? Because they're liars. And there's no truth in them. Nothing they say merits anything about truth, because it's all a bunch of lies. And that is what we've got to understand. But the world is deceived and the world is distracted, because what the world is looking for is a Messiah. And they're hoping that somebody will come soon. They'll unite around that person. But when the person does come, and the person will come, that person will be a person to enslave you and not to free you. Because wherever the majority is running, that's the truth is never there. Wherever you see the majority, the truth is never there, because people never are inclined not to accepting truth. Whatever, I don't know why human nature is so wicked, right? That we don't like to accept truth. Yet still we blame our leaders, right? When our leaders dispense lies to us, when we say, wow, he's a liar, and we don't want to follow them, right? But we ourselves are wicked and evil, aren't we? So that is what. Any comments? Please like the show. I've presented what I had to you. Any questions? Any comments before we end the show? I'm not going to delay having a long program. So do you have any questions, comments? Then we can move on. If not, we can go our separate ways. Okay, thank you so much for joining, and you can like and share the program. All the best.